everyone, and welcome to Financial Minds Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Jaime Agostino. As you know, on this podcast, we're joined by financial industry experts to talk about topics, trends, and themes that credit union professionals need to know about. It is International Fraud Awareness Week, and today I'm joined by Cindy Hagan, VP of Compliance and Fraud Risk with Vizo Financial. Welcome, Cindy. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Jaime. How are you?
Good. Well, I think we can all agree that fraud, it's an everyday occurrence. So Cindy, what type of frauds are credit unions seeing these days?
Sadly, a lot. Just when you think you have figured out what a criminal is going to do, they're going to find yet a new way to take advantage of either a payment system or a vulnerable population or people's concerns. When you have something like the hurricanes we've just had.
Yeah.
There are people out there soliciting funds erroneously, trying to take advantage of people's good nature and people's wanting to help. They will take advantage of people who simply don't know better. They will pretend to be Social Security or the IRS, reaching out to you through a text message or a phone call. Well, none of those government organizations do that. If the IRS is worried about you, you'll get a letter in the mail. But they don't text. But if I don't know that, and I have some reason to be concerned about my return or some part of my finances, I might fall victim to exactly that kind of fraud. And, and it's funny, we often use the terms fraud and scam almost interchangeably. So some of the things that we talk about as frauds, we often refer to them as a scam. So like a romance scam or a business email compromise scam. Those are things that are frauds. People are trying to take your funds from you in an illegal or illicit manner. So it's out there in all kinds of things. When you thought checks were a thing of the past, check fraud is wildly on the rise recently. And that's frankly pretty easy fraud, sending an email, doing a robocall, washing a check and sending them out in mass, just hoping for some hits. It's easy to be the criminal. It is much harder to be, as a financial institution, vigilant enough to catch everything. And the reality is that we aren't going to. But it is incumbent upon all of us to do a better job of being aware of what's happening out there, being alert to what's happening passing through our institutions, and also to raise the awareness of our membership. So, for instance, it's easy to include on a website in an email you send to your staff, to your membership, have a sign in the branch that government agencies will not text you. They're not going to ask you to use prepaid cards or gift cards to pay your tax bill. Just little ways like that we can be a little more vigilant about that. But the types of fraud, sorry to get back to your question, it's a complicated story. But to get back to your question, any way you can transfer funds, somebody is trying to take those funds from you using that method, whether it's wires, ACH, checks, any kind of payment method, and they're reaching out to you in more and more sophisticated ways. There was a time when you'd hear about a grandparent scam, and you'd think, what grandparent doesn't know their own grandchild's voice if this person is calling? And then they used to tell the child's in the jail, can't come to the phone. Now they only need a few seconds of audio clip to be able to use AI and generate a message in your grandchild or child or spouse's voice. So they are alarmingly realistic. And so it is increasingly challenging. And I think, I'm sure I'll say it again, but it's our job to be suspicious, to be vigilant about that. And certainly you don't want to think ill of anybody, but you need to be thoughtful and proactive.
Okay. I read that 1 in 10 adults are victims to fraud based on the Federal Trade Commission. What can a credit union do when their members fall victim to fraud?
Well, Jamie, it's astounding. In the last 5 years, there have been 379 million complaints just to the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint website. So that's just internet crimes. Almost 4 million complaints, and losses are over $38 billion. That's phenomenal. So it's happening, it's growing, it's certainly not going away. You want to be able to give your members some tools, some reporting opportunities, chances to potentially recoup their funds. So there are a lot of websites that are out there to do that reporting. You want to first of all identify that the crime the fraud has happened. Help your member do that. That's often a challenge. Folks are not particularly anxious to say they've been duped, victimized, scammed, whatever you want to say. Nobody is happy to report that. You'll find that across your membership population, there is often a little less reluctance from your younger members than older members based on lots of factors. But for a younger member, it's a loss and they're annoyed and they would like restitution. For an older member, it's often they have other concerns that are impacting that. It's not just the monetary loss. They're also concerned that they will lose some of their independence, whether it's financial or physical, that people will say you can't be trusted to do this anymore on your own. So there are other factors involved for all of those folks. But you want to identify, understand that a fraud has been committed. You want to gather as much information as you can and help them to do that so that they can, if there is an avenue for you to do that, let's say there's a letter of indemnification that the member needs to fill out that the institution can help with. That's a way. Doing a service message on a wire. That's not something that an individual can do on their own. So there are avenues that we can use to try and help our members recoup loss, but identifying that is the first step.
Yeah. I think you said it's a $38 billion business fraud.
Yeah. And that's only fraud reported to the FBI through the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center. So you know that that's a fraction of what's happening out there, because there's certainly all kinds of other methods. I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to look, but every agency that governs some type of that, whether it's the Postal Service or NACHA or SWIFT or any of those systems, they would all have some numbers to add to that total. It's just astounding.
Well, then based on that title, fraud awareness is key. So what fraud awareness and prevention tips can you share with our audience today for credit unions and their members?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, I said I'd repeat it, you just need to be a little more guarded, a little more thoughtful. Don't assume that somebody contacting you is who they purport to be. So I talked about using AI to replicate someone's voice. Somebody can be hacking an email. And so you might get an email from your CEO telling you to initiate a wire payment on behalf of your credit union, and it may actually be their email. you need to as employees stop, think, does this make sense? Am I double checking? There are so many moments in our daily life in a financial institution where we have that second level. If you're sending a wire, you create it, somebody else releases it. Do that second level more often. Whether it's MFA in your access to your website or your application on their phone for your members. Create those moments of least friction, but friction to slow the process, to make people stop. If your member is coming in and initiating a transaction that you have concerns about, try and ask those questions. Some probing questions of the member. Try and they're depositing a check that doesn't make any sense. Get comfortable with asking those questions and being of your member, but also for yourself. Is this the kind of request that I should be getting from my CEO? If you've got tools in your institution that are there in purpose, be sure to use those. For instance, we at Vizo get a little message on an email that says external. If it's coming from somewhere other than an internal website, use that. That should be your moment to go, oh, I need to give this a teeny bit more consideration before I would just respond to it automatically. So it's taking that time, those brief moments of friction, but that friction is often the difference for your member, for your institution. And while that can be, it is a point of friction. And, I had to log into some things today, and you take that up a moment to grab the phone and, do your MFA and authenticate that it is truly you. And you have that moment of, I wish I could just get in. And that I recognize that, but it does not compare to the friction that happens when there is a loss or there is a breach or there is an incident, however you want to think of those. The time spent and the time involved in resolving those situations and financial loss involved with those are tremendous. So it's one of those where you say, well, okay, this is sort of tiresome, but it's a lot better than. So I recognize the value in this moment of friction.
Yeah. It's one of those things. I hear the word friction a lot. And so it's almost like we need to give reminders to our members, that some friction is a good thing and this is why. So you almost need to give those reminders as to why, so that people, because they do get frustrated every day as they're logging in, as you said.
Exactly. And it is. I mean, I'm not, I'm certainly not immune to that too. Now, there are moments when you fat finger your password and whatever, and you think, oh, this is frustrating. But if you can remind yourself, your staff, your membership, those little moments of what that little point of friction is helping to prevent. It's that little insurance policy that's keeping your institution, your member's money secure. Those are good things. So yeah, you want to provide any of those little steps that you can. And heaven forbid they are victims. There are a lot of ways to report, again, based on the type of incident or fraud that's involved there. I talked about the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint website. That's a reporting structure. The FTC has one to report fraud. Theirs is kind of neat. It's a little radio buttons and it walks you through scenarios. So what kind of fraud are you reporting? Was it something that you got in the mail? So was it phone or internet service? Was it online shopping? And so it walks you right through it. So that's kind of a neat one to do. There are the United States Postal Service has reporting. So if it's mail fraud, there are ways to do that. The Justice Department has one for elder financial abuse that you can report there, or they can lead you to the appropriate agencies in your area. So lots of opportunities out there. I'll gladly share those links with you
Yeah.
to include so that, sometimes just looking at the numbers, the FBI does a report annually that is shocking in its detail.
Well, you kind of beat me to my next question a little bit. So how should a credit union go about investigating and reporting fraud? So you're giving us some of the sites where they should be reporting fraud, and I will make sure that I include that in the description for this podcast so that everyone has access to them. But what should they do? Like if a member comes, and reports, how does the credit union go about investigating that?
Sure. Well, there are two angles to this. Your member might come to you and say, I have been a victim. And you want to give them some tools. So, for instance, the FBI's website is best reported by the victim. And that's often the case. Our obligation would be to help direct them if there are steps we can take to help initiate the recovery of potentially some of their funds. That's challenging, but it does happen. And you certainly want to be making those efforts. You want to be directing them as appropriate to any law enforcement agencies that would have jurisdiction. That can be a real challenge because your local police department's not going to necessarily be able to help you with an email that came from, an overseas crime center that just has their little office where they're, sending out their phishing scams. But our obligations as a financial institution are to report those as necessary. You want to ask questions. You want to try and understand and identify when that's happening, because there will be times when you are not, when potentially it's your member or, heaven forbid, an employee. None of those are great scenarios, but there are times when you will have an awareness of activity that is reflective of fraud that you're going to need to report. You want to be able to ask questions of your member. You want to get comfortable with asking questions. I think it is in many of our natures just not to want to ruffle anyone's feather, make anybody uncomfortable, seem like we're being nosy, any of those things. But it's those questions that often can potentially stop fraud or help understand a scenario that we still may feel we need to be reporting. We do have an obligation as a financial institution to report any incidents that we become aware of. So if in just your regular review of accounts, you'll become aware of fraud, or if the member makes you aware of fraud, you would have the SAR filing obligations that we've had for years now. But one of the things that you want to be aware of is that there are keywords or terms in SAR filing that are important. And FinCEN does send out guidance on that. You can get a list of keywords to include because there are SAR review committees regionally that are going through this, but there is a certain amount of review that happens and they will just search for specific words. So if you put in wire fraud, or elder financial abuse, or human trafficking, those keywords will populate and bring that SAR reporting to the attention of the SAR review folks. So that can be super helpful. It's very challenging to send in your SAR report and think nothing ever happens from that one, but it is very important. And it is often that just enough pieces to that puzzle that can lead to a solution. I read about a case in New York where this was a cybercrime situation, and they had 100 SAR reports. that all connected the dots for them. And it was one of the largest cases they were able to prosecute. But those 100 reports didn't come from a single institution. It's important that we do that, that it be thorough, as detailed as you can be with that. And again, in your filing, that you're including as much information in there as will allow the SAR review folks to get it to the right law enforcement agencies to be able to bring that to a positive conclusion.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, obviously being in the financial world, we follow a lot of policies and procedures, Cindy. So what type of policies and procedures should credit unions have in place regarding fraud?
Well, I said it in the beginning, any payment type, somebody is out there trying to find a way to manipulate it, to get involved in redirecting that inappropriately. So they're clever. They're a lot of tools. That's what they do. So they're often pretty good at it. Excuse me. So there are things that you can, as an institution, think about. If you put limits on transactions, whether it's dollar limits or frequency, you need to be reviewing activity. Are you seeing ACH payments, same dollar amount? Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. Same dollar amount going to the same vendor. Now, I'm going to grab a quick drink. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Maybe their Netflix payment. Their Netflix payment's going to be there the same for a whole bunch of members every month. That's not unusual, but you might see a different payment that's coming in regularly, that suddenly, in a sudden velocity, you can limit or block some of those IP addresses or vendors. Those are reviews that you're doing kind of real time, but also some overview of. And as I said, you just need to get comfortable asking questions. Your frontline staff, your lenders, they all should be asking thoughtful questions. If a 90-year-old is coming in and wants to take a home equity loan suddenly, that's a significant amount of money, do them and you a favor, ask some more questions. And your staff needs to know if they have that gut feeling, how to escalate, who to escalate. Another option would be to add a trusted contact to accounts. That's not something that we've seen a lot, but it can be a very useful tool. And if that's something that you start incorporating in accounts, when somebody's healthy and active and employed and engaged, then it doesn't feel like you're singling out more vulnerable populations for that. But a trusted contact is somebody that can be contacted if you, as an institution, have concerns about activity on the member's accounts, who might know, have reason to understand what changes might be happening in that individual's life that might make sense then in terms of activity, but might also help you alert and intervene to protect your member and their accounts.
All right. Let's talk regulation. What regulations must credit unions comply with in relationship to fraud at their credit union?
Well, I think there are very few mandates out there regarding fraud. We certainly want to be safe and sound institutions. So we don't want to be allowing that kind of thing to knowingly happen in our institutions. So SAR reporting, as I mentioned, if we have awareness of activity, we would be required to report. The FedNow service that is fairly new, and if you're a participant, excuse me, you would have an obligation to report. And that is a requirement as a participant in FedNow, that if you have any awareness of fraud, that you report that as soon as it's available to you. And that then becomes a tool for the broader network. And you, in reporting that, might be saving another institution from becoming their members becoming victims to that particular recipient. NACHA has rules as well regarding fraud and the reporting of that. You can utilize their reporting structure through NACHA, but you also, again, want to be looking at activity. You should be aware of dramatic changes. Again, that's happening real time. It's not practical for every transaction to be reviewed manually. There are software and applications out there that will help identify some of that. Some folks are using some neat AI capabilities to try and recognize and identify those transactions. So that's out there. But there are, to be frank, very few actual hard and fast regulations related to fraud. So it becomes, it feels obvious, like nobody's pro-fraud. You don't want that to happen at your institution. But in terms of what we are required to do, those would be just the basic and what almost feels obvious, that you would want to be conducting transactions that are keeping you safe and sound and your members' funds as well.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. Any final thoughts for our listeners today?
I'm going back to friction and questions.
Yeah.
Expect the friction and recognize the value it adds, and ask questions, share information. If you're aware of something, share it with your staff. An incident, maybe it's somebody you know, something you read about, share it, and share with your membership as well. Give those opportunities, because you don't know what you don't know, and that makes you potentially vulnerable to some of these sophisticated scams. So thanks for having me, Jamie.
You're welcome.
It's a complicated topic, but it's certainly one that impacts all of us on the regular basis.
Yeah, yeah. In addition to ask questions, you said be suspicious. So I'm going to be suspicious more as well. So thank you so much, Cindy. I learned a lot, and I appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge with our listeners today.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right. This episode of Financial Minds Meet the Experts is brought to you by Vizo Financial's 2025 Risk Management Conference. In the world of credit unions, where financial services meet the unpredictable, a delicate dance between light and darkness ensues. In the midst of the shadows, risk management serves as the guiding light, illuminating the path through potential scams, unexpected disasters, fraud schemes, and more. To dispel the darkness of unforeseen risk, credit unions must shine a light on new and emerging risk management tools and practices. Therefore, you must save the date for Vizo Financial's Risk Management Conference on April 14th through the 16th, 2025 in Hershey, PA. Be on the lookout for more information in the coming weeks. As always, thanks for listening, and make it a great day.